The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends on what time you're actually viewing the show. Welcome back. I am D-Nice. And what I always do on my shows is I say that we have people in here we're going to interview, but then when it comes down to it, I do no interviews. The name of this show is Center Stage. And what we do is I want to be able to highlight and acknowledge those people that are doing significant things and making great strides and opening up new doors in our community, in our world, that would change us from the acidic, toxic formation that we've had so far and turn us back into a loving, caring, sharing world. And we start here by honoring those that are part of that. And tonight's no different. I have a young lady here that has done a lot for her community, for her city, and for herself. But basically, she's a woman that has the heart to help others, especially young ladies find their way through a crazy, toxic, crooked environment that we call the US of A right now as we know it. So what I want to do is I want to introduce her, and we're going to have the fun of just sitting back, chopping it up on Center Stage, and we're going to be able to talk with her and follow her journey from then until now and where she sees herself in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome the one, the only Miss Angela Parker. Hello, young lady.
Hi, wow, that's quite an introduction.
Thank you for joining us today, though. You've done a lot. I was able to see you on, a friend of mine has a show, and I was able to see you and hear some of the things, and it really impressed me because I wanted to go deeper, because out there's a young lady listening that's going to say, okay, well, okay, she looks like me, she sounds like me, but how can I relate? Mm-hmm. How does it relate to me? What people are really needing to know now, in life now, going forward, is where somebody's come from, where they're at now, and where they plan to be in the future. And if those goals and everything aligns to their needs, wants, and desires, then you have a friend for life, somebody who follows you for life. And that's what we're trying to do in young ladies and young men, too. But you specialize in working with young ladies. So this is what we're going to talk about. You can go back as far as you want to, but we want to get into Angela before, now, and after. Okay. So thank you for coming down and joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, here she is.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Angela Parker. I'm so happy to be a guest on the show. Currently, I'm the Director of Trainings and Programs at Genesee Center, which is the oldest domestic violence intervention program in South LA. Been there for about 15 years. I run the Outreach and Education program, so primarily I work with youth. Okay. From that, I really got a chance to see just kind of the need that our youth have for mentorship. Going into schools, talking to kids, understanding that our kids are brilliant. They're smart. They have a great understanding of the world. But the problem is that they don't connect sort of negative behaviors to what it is that they're doing. And then also, a lot of the people around them are not inspirational to them. Like they don't have mentors that they can look at and be like, I can do this. I can be a doctor. I can be a lawyer. I can be a pharmacist. I can be a judge. Right. I can be a teacher because I see somebody that looks like me do that. So I saw the importance of mentorship, particularly for young Black girls who I felt were kind of getting sort of lost in all the talk about Black boys, because I know Black boys, of course, is really important and they do have their issues. But I think a lot of times we think that our girls are okay. Like they got it. They're still mature. They're super women, Black magic, all that kind of stuff. They got it. But it's like, no, they need nurturing and they need mentorship, like, just like anybody else, They're trying to figure this out just like everybody else. They've never done any of this stuff before. And so that's why I came up with my own nonprofit, which is Phenom Girls, where I work with middle school age kids. And I thought about middle school because I thought by the time you get to high school, you're sort of on the cusp of adulthood and you feel like you sort of have everything figured out and you're not as open sort of to, I think, having somebody kind of help mentor you and help you grow as they are in middle school. So I figured that was sort of a good age. And what I do is I do a lot of different programs and I just bring women in and they talk to the girls about, a variety of different subjects like self-empowerment and, really to get them to think about goals. Because a lot of kids are just living day to day, right? Living day to day. They're focused on what they're wearing, what they're going to eat, who they're going to go out with, what sport they're playing or whatever. And they're not thinking about, okay, if I make this choice right here, it might derail me for the rest of my life. Because they're not thinking of long-term goals, right? Like if I do this, I might end up in college. Or if I do this, I might end up in jail and I might not be able to do whatever it is that I want to do. And so it just really is about kind of inspiring young girls to sort of, like my tagline is to kind of embrace the phenomenal, like young woman within. And then I also come from a journalism background. So at 19, I started working at the Wave Community newspaper. And because I was the youngest person there, they always assigned me all the youth stories. So I was out and I was doing the youth stories and I was like, man, like, we're doing like really positive things. I was just thinking in my head, and we never see that on the news. Like you always see the negative stuff. So I always had in the back of my head since I was 19 that I was going to do a newspaper that was totally focused on positive news about young Black kids. And, of course, that's when the, newspaper was at its height and you could never imagine, like, there won't be any newspapers, right? Because there'd always been newspapers, but I still do it. It's called Generation Next, and it's actually an online news magazine, and it's written by and for Black youth, and it's intentionally Black because I feel like Black youth, they need to have their own spaces where they can feel safe enough to tell their own narratives.
Now, 19 was a pivotal year. So let's step back a little more so we can focus in on a few things of what motivation edged you on, who your solid state emissions were pointed towards. So let's go back to the younger days. Let's go back. Where were you from? Were you born?
I was one of those weirdos that were born and raised in Los Angeles.
Wow. Never heard it put like that before. Okay. All right. So born and raised in Los Angeles. Okay. Were your parents into the field of PR or media or?
No. So what it was two things happening. One, I was always interested in writing. Like I was just always a writer. Like I remember I would be in first grade and I'd have an assignment where they would say, write a sentence for your spelling word, and I would like write stories, right? So, and then that thing too is I always had a huge imagination. Like I always liked, science fiction and fantasy and things like that. And I was the only person at the time. Like that was before it's cool to be a nerd. Like now everybody likes that stuff, right? But at the time, I was the only person that I knew that read comic books or watched Star Trek, particularly like a Black girl. You know what I mean? It was almost, just kind of like, okay, that's kind of weird, but you do you. So that was just kind of the thing. And so I always knew I wanted to write. But my whole thing was always, they're always telling you, writers never make any money. So I'm like, well, you know what? That's kind of true. So I'm like, what can I do where I could write and make some money? So again, this, was before anybody had any idea that journalism was going to change as drastically as it did. I thought I'd be a newspaper reporter. That way I can write, I can make some money, and then I could, and I'm really interested about the world. Like I always, for whatever reason, just had an interest in politics. Like, as a matter of fact, I remember, like, I begged my parents to get cable so we could get CNN so I could watch the Al Gore's debate with Ross Perot. Like, I just always just been interested in that stuff. Just, I don't know, I just have. So I'm like, I can combine like all my interests, together. And so that's how I became interested in journalism.
Well, okay, so you were interested a lot in the politics and stuff like that. Okay, but you understood politics at a young age.
I thought I understood politics.
So why didn't you go into politics?
Well, I never had a desire to go into politics because I was going to be a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, right? That was going to be me going into politics, right? Like the fourth estate of government, right? That's what I was going to do, and I felt like I was on a trajectory to do that. But it's really funny because you know how one of those things that happens in life where you end up doing something that you never thought you would ever do. Like this type of work I'm doing right now, like working at Genesee Center, which I feel is kind of part of my life's calling. It's nothing I ever thought about doing, like in a million years. It's really something where it was like a door opened for me and I just kind of walked through it. I was actually a journalist at the time and I had got assigned to write a story about Genesee Center. I had never heard about Genesee at all. I didn't know anything about domestic violence. So when they told me I was going into a shelter, I thought I was going into like a mission kind of situation, with some cots. And,
right.
I mean, I just didn't really expect much. And so when I got to the center and I was like so impressed by the beautiful facilities, they had a boutique, they had a classroom, they had like childcare, like the staff was so nice. I was like, wow, like I never and I grew up in the community, and I'm like, I've never heard of this place before. Like, I wouldn't think it would be this nice. Like, and I just really when I was interviewing the CEO at the time, Karen Earl, she and I just, for whatever reason, we just really, clicked. And so it was a year and a half later, and she called me out the blue, and she's like, hi, I'm Karen Earl, do you remember me? And I was like, oh yeah, from Genesee Center. She's like, when I met you, I felt like you were a person that was really meant to work here. And we have an opening, are you interested? And at the time, I was at someplace and I was really unhappy. And so I was like, you know what, this could be good for you because you could go work there for like a year until you figure out what it is you want to do. And that was like 15 years later. Right. I guess this is what I really want to do. So, and I had no training in that social work field or anything like that. Like all my training was in journalism, communications, English. And so it was on the job training, but I think it helped me because I got to come from domestic violence from the experience of people who didn't understand it. And because I was doing outreach and communication, I could help other people try to understand it based on the things that I had known or like the assumptions that I had that I had to like unlearn.
Now, those assumptions that brought you greater knowledge once you started, okay? Because you said you didn't know anything about domestic violence, so evidently it didn't happen around you.
No.
That's which is kind of rare and nowadays because everybody knows somebody who's going through it. They might not understand why, but they know somebody do. So you were going from one side of just being the normal nerd per se into something that is reality based right there. But getting there, the education that you got, that you received. Talk about the little education tracks that you've been involved with that got you equipped for where you're at.
Well, I've always been really like into education. Just I like to read, and and I was always like one of those people that just like to get good grades and all that other kind of stuff. And so, but I think what really helped me was when I went into high school. I went to Mac-La-Hart, which was a college prep school. So I never not thought I was going to go to college, like never, and I was always kind of on this track, and when I was in, I think I was I a sophomore? I think I was a sophomore or junior. I had this English teacher, and I had written like an essay and he's like, you're a really good writer. You know what I mean? And like I was like, well, thank you. So he helped me and he bumped me into honors classes, which like didn't happen. So usually the way I worked at this school was when you tested to get in, if you would test in immediately like into honors class and you'd be on an honors trajectory and then you do AP classes and all that great stuff. And so because he bumped me into honors English, then I ended up in an honors trajectory. So then it was honors English and I was able to get all these other honors classes, which never would have happened if it wasn't for him. You know what I mean? And I would have got a great education there regardless, but it bumped me kind of up into another level. And so then when it was time to go to college, it was around when the riots had happened, the Rodney King riots had happened. So, I was like all black, right? So I was going to a historically black college, right?
Right.
And so I went on a tour, and at first I wanted to go to Howard, but then I went to Howard, and I really didn't like Howard because at the time, but I fell in love with Hampton. So I went to Hampton University, and I was there for a year. And then I had a cousin that was going there at the time who wanted to be a doctor. And she came back from Christmas break, and she was showing me all these pictures. And she had gotten an internship, and she was in the hospital with her lab coat or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I'm like, I'm behind. I'm like, I said that I want to be a journalist, but look at her. She's like, so I said, when I go home for the summer, I'm going to give myself an internship, right? So I walked into just like a super naive kid. I just walked off the street into the wave, and I was like, I want an internship. And they were like, we don't give internships. I'm like, what do you mean you don't like give internships, right? I'm like, you're a newspaper, right? And they're like, well, we don't do that. And I was like, well, why don't you just at least like give me an opportunity? And so I think the guy, he was just trying to get rid of me or whatever. And he was like, okay, fine. Like, there's going to be this carnival, and like, where was it? That's in Norwalk, Linwood. I want you to cover it, right? So I said, okay. So I go and I cover it, and I come back, and he's like, and he's sitting in his chair, and he's like, well, it's just what I thought. You're really green, and you need some work. And he's like, let's go over your thing. So he starts going over the article, and I'm like, I didn't write that. And he was like, no. I'm like, no, I wrote the article like on the carnival. And he's like, oh, okay. So then he found my thing, and he's like, he's like, this is not bad, He's like, if you want to come, he's like, you can come. He's like, our editor's on vacation, but, if you just want to hang around, you can hang around. So I came, and at the time, it just so happens a couple of weeks into it, the Wave got bought. And the other newspapers that they had internship programs. And so they were like, okay, well, now you can officially, be an intern, because we have the internship program. And I was like, great. And so I did that program, and they liked me so much at the end of the program, they asked me if I wanted a job. And so I was like, again, young, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to, delay going back to college, because this is what I really want to do. I'm doing what I want to do. And so I started working at the Wave full time. And then a couple of years into that, I'm like, I really want to go back to college, but I didn't want to go back to Virginia. Okay. And so what I did was I went to Southwest College to get some more credits, and I transferred into UCLA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So by now you've gone to several schools. You had a chance to look at the black colleges versus out here, coming from out here.
Yeah.
You're going to Howard. So that must have been some kind of transitional phase right there.
Hampton, yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. So, but Hampton was great for me because I was lucky. My cousin was there. And actually, she wasn't a cousin that I knew, but And then two of my friends, actually, funnily enough, one of my childhood friends that I went to grammar school was there, and another friend I went to high school was there. So I didn't have to make all new friends, with a certain kind of comfort level, where, and so that was good. But I liked going there. It was a great experience. I always tell people, go away for a year at least, or 2 years, get away from home. Right. I love to travel and things like that. But I think as a kid, it does you good, to go away to college. Right, at least. And even if you don't like it, the great thing is it's only 4 years and you can come back, but I always encourage people to do that. But, I think, I loved going to UCLA. I loved every second of it. UCLA is not for everybody because they're not always equated to a situation where they throw you into the ocean and you have to learn how to swim, right? They're not super supportive. So I know of people who have gone to UCLA and didn't like it or haven't been able to navigate it. But I've always been, kind of self-sufficient and, whatever, and I liked it. So that was kind of my thing there. And then, a few years after that, I thought, let me go back and get a degree. Because I always had this desire to be a professor, right? And so I'm like, I'm going to go and I'm going to get a master's in English. So I can teach English. And so that's how I ended up getting my master's at National University. And then I was like, I don't think I'm going to be an English teacher because it looks like this thing that I'm doing with Genesee is kind of what I'm meant to do. But the funny thing is, I'm like, maybe I should get some more education around what I'm doing, right? Because I don't know anything about social work. I don't know anything about sort of organizational leadership, maybe it will help me do my work better. And so I actually got into a master's program at Cal State Dominguez, a public policy program. And I had finished I hadn't even finished one semester of that when a friend of mine called. And she's like, USC has this doctorate program in organizational leadership and development. We should apply. And I was like, okay. And I just was like, I'm just applying, just not even thinking about it. You know what I mean? And then I got in. So I'm like, I'm going to do this. You know what I mean? I'm going to do this doctorate program instead of getting a second master's, and that's how I kind of got into doing that. And that of course was great because when you go to school as an adult and you know why you're going to school, right? And you know that you're going to school because not because you have to or just because I'm interested in this topic, but because you're like, this is going to help me make the world a better place and to be better at my job. And so it's a completely different experience. And it did. I learned so much from that program, and it was great. And the interesting thing, too, is people are like, watch, people are going to treat you differently, when you have a doctorate.
Right.
And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, it's just, I never thought about it. But I'm telling you, people will literally be talking to me and their posture will become totally different. When they find out, like, I have a doctorate, right? Or they'll just become, like, more interested in what I'm saying or different things like that. So it is interesting, I'm not hung up on titles and different things like that. Like, I only use it, like, in certain settings. I don't, some people are always like, call me doctor.
Exactly, yeah.
Which, and I get that because it's a lot of work to get that doctorate. So I get it. But for me, it was just more about getting the knowledge that I thought that I needed to be able to do the work that I do for the community better.
Right. And you're right. It's nostalgia about the doctor part of it. I know quite a few young ladies that's gone back and got their doctors, and now it's doctor this and doctor that, and you're like, really, I knew you when you were Karen or Becky or whatever.
Yeah, I know, and don't get me wrong, like, I don't fault anybody for that because having gone through the experience, it ain't easy.
No, it's not.
So if I don't fault anybody for wanting to say, call me doctor, if that's what you want, that's what I'll do because I do feel like you've earned it.
Exactly.
But just for me, it's just not something that I'm, super big on.
No, the difference is, there's some that appear to be in the clouds and they like up there, and there's others that have their feet on the ground, and that's where they want to be. So if you're doing something because it's going to help you in life, and despite what fame and fortune it brings to you, but you're doing it out of the love. You're going to do it when there's no money involved. You're going to do it when there's no love involved. You're going to do it because that's you. Yeah. And that's the difference in what you're saying you did in accomplishing the mission you did from others that, you guys went the same kind of hardships and long hours and sleepless nights, but you didn't lord that over. You're saying, okay, this is what I do to boost me up. It's helping your job.
Yeah, and I think that, not just me, I feel like that's just people who are in nonprofit work in general. Right. When you talk to people who are in nonprofit, they are heroes. They work long hours for very little pay, and they do it solely because they care about people and because they want to make their community better, and there's just so many people who just inspire me, to do it. And it's just, I think it takes a certain type of person, like even for me, because I could not work in the shelter portion of it just because I don't feel like I have the temperament for it. But I feel like I'm really great with youth, right? And creating programs to help them sort of connect with it. So I just feel like it just takes a certain type of skill set to just be able to connect with people. And it's important to know your gifts and what it is you can do and what it is that you can't do.
Right.
And if you can't do something, who can I partner up with? Or who can I help? If I can't do it, but I feel like it needs to be done, who can I help to help, make sure that it is accomplished? So, working in, like I said, working in the community, like working in basically kind of social work, it really makes you feel like you're giving to the world, but at the same time, as weird as that as it sounds, you're getting back as well because, you're helping people and it feels good.
And that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, how do you feel?
Yeah.
When you're doing this that may be low on your totem pole for what you thought you were going to do, you know what I'm saying? Because we all have aspirations. When I reach this pinnacle, when I reach this age, when I reach this astute position, I'll do X, Y, and Z. But that may be something that is in the far future, near future, but it's not happening now.
Yeah.
So how do you utilize your gifts now?
Yeah, and that's something for me too, because people are always like, "Oh my God, like you're so accomplished and this, that, and everything," and I'm always focused on the things that I haven't done yet or the dreams that like haven't been fulfilled. So I think that's a challenge for everybody to just kind of live in the moment, like you said, and to just really be grateful for what you're doing now, for what you have now. Sometimes I think a lot of people are stuck in a mode of where they're living in the past or they're looking to the future.
Exactly.
And the present is just as important, and so that's one of the lessons that, I had to learn, just to kind of stop and slow down. I have a friend that's always telling me, you're always like, you're just always thinking too much sometimes and just always, but sometimes you just need to just relax and just meditate and have some alone time and really think about what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. And that'll help you really figure out what it is you need to do next.
Yes, because otherwise it could run you crazy.
Yeah.
If you concentrate on anything like this toxic world and going to the elections and going to the pandemic
God,
or whatever,
the election.
I know people are just stuck watching television.
Okay, that was me. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I've been glued to the television for the last 3 days. I just, it's just, but I'm a news junkie anyway. Like,
right,
I have to tell you, like, I'm one of those people, that, like, not so much in the past couple of years, because I have to tell you, just the sound of Trump's voice is just like nails on the chalkboard for me. But pre-Trump, I was one of those people. I would wake up, I would listen to political talk radio. Right. I would come home, I would turn on like the news, and that's MSNBC. I'd be watching that or CNN all night. So I'm a reformed news junkie. So I think this election has kind of like brought that back. But yeah, it's one of those things. I think the thing about this election though that's been so different from the other ones is that you really feel like you're fighting, and this is the thing about being Black, that you're fighting to hold on to all the gains that we made. Like, there was this real fear that if Trump got back into office, we were going to have to be, it was going to, like, put us back, like, 100 years.
Right.
And so I think that's what it is. And, of course, for me, I don't know how other people feel, but I'm incredibly, incredibly excited to have the first Black vice president. She was actually my candidate of choice, before she dropped out. So when he picked her, I was thrilled, that she was like on the ballot or whatever. So personally for me, it's just, it's exciting, and I think that for a lot of people who really kind of care about this country and where it goes, because I know a lot of people don't care about politics, or a lot of people don't think their vote matters, which I hope they understand now that it does. I mean, people are counting like every single vote, so your vote does matter. But for me, I think, you can't say that you want reform and not somehow find out how you can plug yourself into the political system, at the very least, if not vote. The thing that makes me crazy is people are like, I don't vote because they haven't done nothing for me. Well, what have you done? That's what I've been asking them lately. Right. I'm like, at the very least, okay, you don't vote. I mean, very least you don't vote, which to me is the very least you can do, because people die for you to do that. But okay, let's say you don't vote. Who do you mentor? Where do you volunteer? What programs are you doing, like, in your community to make life better? you know, so you can't sit around and say nobody's done nothing for me when you're not doing anything. Like, democracy is a participatory sport, people.
Two-way.
Yeah.
This is gate.
Yeah, you give what you put into it. And if you're not putting nothing into it, you're not going to get nothing out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
And my thing is, I don't expect people to think like me. I don't expect people to have the same values as me. I don't expect people to like the same people I like. You know, hey, it's a free, you know, thank goodness it's American. We still have the freedom to do all that stuff. But I do expect you to do something. You know what I mean?
Come to the
besides
table
complain.
Yeah, come to the table with something.
Yeah.
That's just all that's required, really. But everybody wants to be that superhero, and they stress themselves out trying to be that.
Yeah.
Because the superhero capes are not easily worn and they're not easily attained. But once you have that, you're required to fulfill that. And some people don't count the count.
Yeah,
you know, the cost is what you got to count and say, okay, what am I giving up to get this? What kind of time? What kind of energy? And then you can find yourself draining yourself just on the contemplation.
Yeah.
And never, you know, being on a treadmill. You could run 1,000,000 miles on the treadmill, and guess what? You haven't moved an inch.
Although, you know, I have to tell you, I'm one of those people that actually like being on a treadmill. I just put on, because it's actually relaxing to me. Like, I just put on my music and I go. And I could just, like, not think about nothing. But, again, I told you I'm, you know, different. But, you know, I think it's interesting. I think, like you said, sort of with great power comes great responsibility. You know what I mean? And I think that's what it is. But I think people don't understand that you don't have to be president of the United States to make a difference. You know what I mean? You don't even have to volunteer to make a difference, but you can make a difference in your own family. You know what I mean? You would be the thing that just is so crazy to me, and particularly one of the reasons why, you know, I thought I'm so big on mentorship. Is that we don't even take the time to mentor our own kids. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, when I do, as part of the work I do with Genesee with our Generation J Youth Initiative, where we work with middle school, high school, and college university students around the issues of domestic violence, we try to, like, do things with the parents, and for whatever reason, they're not engaged. You know what I mean? Right. And so if you do nothing but be the best parent that you could be to your child and engage with them, care about their education, you know, be a positive role model for them, you've done a lot to make the next generation better.
That's true.
You know?
That's true. And because of this close proximity we're getting thrown into because of the pandemic, they have historically had record numbers of domestic violence situations in households.
Correct.
Now, I done been around baby kids, okay? And I've seen the way that they treat their parents. I've been to grocery stores when the kids have acted out, thrown tantrums, and especially in the upper crust neighborhoods when they just sit on the floor and they won't move and they're just saying no to the parents and all kind of stuff that our ancestors would have us locked in a closet for, you know what I'm saying, or beat to death for and get away with it. It's just that things have changed in such a way. And now our kids, as a person of color, have been able to find solace in making friends among other cultures and other races. And sometimes they have a tendency to pick up some bad habits.
Well, you know, I think here's the thing with kids, right? You know, I don't have kids, you know, and I know that people have different views on sort of corporal punishment. But kind of one thing that I do see with kids is, so kids, even though they're little, their brain kind of matures faster than you think. I mean, they start talking at like 1, right? Yeah. And so the thing about it is, I feel like a lot of times parents don't lay good foundations for their kids. They don't set up boundaries early enough. By the time, you know, if you're trying to set a boundary up for a kid that's 5, and they're 5 and they're still little, but it's almost kind of too late, right? Because by then they've learned that they're going to be rewarded for bad behavior. If they throw themselves on the ground, they're going to, you know, they're going to, okay, Bobby, you know, let me get you this thing. Just stop crying. You know what I mean? And so, you know, I just think that's one of the things too. Like, again, we have to kind of lead, you know, by example. And I think that's, I'm a just really big on people who are lucky enough to have children to tell them to just be engaged from the moment that the child is born, you know? And I know, like, as Black people, you know, we always tell these things like, you know, we wouldn't put up with that, you know, we would do this, that, and the other thing. And again, I don't think you have to, if you choose to, like, discipline your kid physically, I feel like that's your choice as long as you don't, you know, crazy about it. But I think, too, parents that don't want to do that, there are certain ways that you can reach your kid without having to do that. But again, you have to put in the work to be able to do that. And I think that a lot of parents just, I mean, they abdicate kids. Like somebody said to me, which I think is true, parents drop their kids off in preschool or kindergarten, depending on how young they start in school, pick them back up in 12th grade, and they want to know what happened. You know, and that's why with the pandemic, you mentioned the pandemic, all these parents are going crazy now because they have to homeschool their kids, and they see that when a teacher called you and told you, you know, that, you know, Sarah, whatever was bad, they're not going to say Sarah's bad. You know, we're having some challenges, you know, with Sarah. You're like, oh, no, not Sarah. Sarah, she's an angel. And now you have to spend 24 hours with Sarah, and you're like, oh, you know, Sarah may have some challenges.
Right. You
know what I mean?
Eye-opening, yeah.
So it's just like, you know, I think, you know, and the thing, too, is I think that we do not understand how hard it is for some of our kids, especially our kids in the community, right? Some of our kids, you know, they don't have parents. They're in foster care. They might be being raised by grandparents or aunts and uncles, and they have a lot of, like, anger, like, around that because their parents, like, aren't around. You know, their parents might be dead. They might be in jail. They might be, you know, incapacitated for whatever reason. You know, they might be in a situation where maybe there is domestic violence going on in the home, or maybe they're living in, you know, poverty, and they don't literally know where they're going to put their head or where they're going to sleep at, you know. And they're going through all these issues, and you expect the kid to be in school and have a pencil in their hand and be able to get an A+ on this test, right? Without understanding every single thing that they're going through that's making that impossible. Stress at home. Maybe they live in a situation where they're in a neighborhood might have gangs, so they have to navigate that. You know, maybe they're a young woman and they have to, in a situation where they have to navigate all that is, and, you know, and sex trafficking and drugs, and they might be being abused by their boyfriend, or the guy, because it happens to guys too, might be abused by his girlfriend. You know, I'm in the class and I'm in this gang right here, and then right next to me is the person who's in my rival gang. You know what I mean? It's a lot of issues that kids are dealing with that, you know, I might not have had breakfast. I might not know, you know, I might not want to go home because I don't know, you know, mom is an alcoholic and I don't know what's going to happen when I get there. And so it's all these issues that kids are dealing with, and we just always want to default to say, oh, they're bad, or oh, they're troubled, or oh, they're this and that, without even trying to talk to them to see why it is that they're acting out the way that they're acting out. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not the kind of doctor. I'm a doctor of education.
Gotcha. Oh, well.
So the only thing I can just say is from what I see, you know, is that we don't take the time to talk to our kids. And again, back to mentorship, we don't mirror the type of behavior. Because let me tell you something. When people say all that bull about, oh, Black kids can't succeed, let me tell you something. At Genesee, I've been working at Genesee for 15 years, and our Generation J program is also a volunteer program. I've had so many Black kids volunteer that come through that program, grown now. They went to Ivy League schools, lawyers, engineers, doctors, corporate people, because their parents were successful and they had somebody that they could look up to. And, you know, because we do what we see, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And even sometimes when we tell ourselves, oh, I'm never going to be like my mom, I'm never going to be like my dad, because that's all we know, that sort of ended up becoming our default, right?
Yes.
So kids that have successful parents, they know it can happen. They've given a blueprint, because the parents are like, this is how I became successful, so this is how I'm going to make sure that you become successful. And that's a lot of, too, with parents. You know, parents love their kids, but you can't teach what you don't know, right? So if you've never, you know, if you have a kid that's interested in going to college and you've never gone to college, that's not a high priority for you, because, and I'm not saying everybody, but for some people, because you didn't go to college and you turned out fine, and you can't really help them through the process, which is kind of why, you know, mentorship is, you know, kind of important. You know, for somebody to be able to step into that gap, who has been through a certain experience that you have not, to be able to help your youth if they're interested in it.
That's true, because you can't move forward with something that's unterritorial, that's been untried and unmarked in your life.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times we'll find somebody too on the other end of the spectrum, giving fairness to both sides, that will try to live vicariously through their kids.
Yeah.
I was this. I became that. I was a part of this. And so they want the kid to do it. The kid's
that's
I'm
not me.
Interested. Right. Because you don't take the time to find out what it is you're interested in. You plot and you put them on a certain track. And then you say, okay, I want you to be sports. I want you to play baseball. I want you to play football, whatever. And they're like, I like track.
Yeah.
Okay. But how long does it take to sit back and say, okay, you like sports. I see that, and I know you play. So which sport would you like to? If we got a chance to work with you, and what sport would you like? What study is better for you? I see you're making A's in this one here, but you're having problems with this one over here. You're making D's or whatever. What do you need to help you with this here? What can we do to help? We don't communicate with our kids because we have the understanding that, okay, I made it. And the farther back you go, it's like, well, I pulled up by my bootstraps and I got it done, and so you do the same thing. Which today, we have kids that are so tech-orientated that all they know is how to look up something or, play the games. And everything is, mentally challenged. But if you learn how to put that in perspective of a kid at this age, you don't have to be a psychologist to figure this out. And saying, look, what can we do to get a better understanding of what you need and what we need to give you to help you? Okay, what do you like? What do you don't like? What in school is making you to where you're getting a D in history or in math? You don't like math? And put it in context, they can understand. Well, math helps you count money.
And not to be ashamed to ask for help. You know what I mean? I mean, when I was growing up, I was pretty good in school, but, I wasn't great in everything. Math wasn't my subject, but, you just try to do the best you can, figure it out. And then when I went to college and I had to take, statistics, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to take statistics. I got a tutor. Right. I actually did very well in statistics. I got an aunt. And I realized then, you're not going to never know how to do everything. But when you don't, you ask for help. You ask for help from somebody who does know how to do it. Yes. You know what I mean? Yep. And I learned that lesson late. But that's one of the things, too, again, why mentorship I feel is so important, because you can't possibly know how to do everything. You can't. But when you get help from somebody that does know, it makes all the difference in the world.
And then we don't have excuses. You've got places like Khan's Academy. You have other online places that go from kindergarten all up to high school that will teach you through tutorship. So you can't say, well, I lack money, there's no excuse for getting something done if you want to.
I agree, but here's the thing, too, and that's when I talked about you got to start early, right? We have so many, and I'm just going to be frank now because we're talking frank. There are so many programs out there, free programs, that unfortunately our black kids are just not taking advantage of. And it's because they have never been taught the importance of it. It's really hard to tell a 16-year-old kid, who considers themselves to be grown, now it's time to start caring about education. Right. It's too late. Yes. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying totally off the board, because there are always going to be those kids, you could just put them in a corner and never talk to them, but there's something inside of them that they're like, I'm going to be great, right? That's like 1 out of 99. Like, everybody has to be nurtured. Everybody needs somebody to help them along the journey in life, right? Correct. And you have to start early. There's all these things that our kids can take advantage of, college prep courses, everything, but because they have never been taught to value education, for whatever reason, or they don't have parents, you call parents and you're like, I have somebody that works at a college prep class, call, Johnny's not here. The mama, oh, well, it's Saturday and he wanted to sleep in. So obviously this is pre-COVID.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And, so, hey, okay. You know what I mean? It's like, again, that's when I tell people, if parents could just take more of an interest in some parents, because there's some, of course, parents that are like, oh, just take more of an interest in your child. If you don't do nothing else, but just take an interest in your own children. You know what I mean? Everything would be great, because they would be successful, more successful than you. But I find a lot of people have this attitude, and it's not their fault. It's what they've been told. Nobody ever did nothing for me. So you need to figure it out. Well, if somebody had helped you, and I'm sure you're doing great and everything, but imagine how much further you could have been if somebody helped you. And imagine how much further this person could be if you were to help them. You know what I mean? Right. You can't tell people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps when they don't even have boots. You know, it's that thing. But I think a lot of people, especially Black people, because we struggle so hard to get where we are without mentorship, without networking, without the opportunities that other people have, we feel like, well, I did it. You know what I mean? And you need to do it too. Get yours. I got mine, you need to get yours. But without understanding that the way the world works for everybody else is they networking. You know what I mean? You got this job because your dad knew somebody. Right. You know what I mean? That mentorship and networking make the world go around. And I feel like we're just starting to understand that. We're starting to understand the whole thing about generational wealth and leaving things to our kids and teaching our kids things. But, you know, I mean, we're people who have had to focus more on survival and have not had the luxury of doing these things. And as we become more successful, we have been able to do those things, and so that's great, you know. But I just always tell people, you know, just because you didn't get the type of help that you needed, please don't use that as an excuse not to help other people.
Well, that's the world. Like I said, we're in a technologically savvy world. Which means that if you need something done, you can go to resources and find out how to do it. You got YouTubes out there that you can YouTube anything you want to do, okay? No matter what it is. But our kids use the technology for different applications because they're not taught that, you know what, whatever you do now will set a precedent for later in life. They either throw at them something to keep them busy. Okay, so you're bothering me. Here's my phone. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so the kids like, okay, they got a phone, so they go into something. They go into something that they want to hear. Very seldom we get a kid that wants to go to educational program, unless you're taught at a young age that educational sequence, and you get a love for that educational, like a Sesame Street raised kid versus MTV. Or BET raised kid. When you get that phone, first thing you want to go is to, you know what I'm saying, TikTok or this right here. While the other kid is going to Sesame Street or whatever is educational, whether history or whatever. And so there's two fragments right there. And so it depends on if you go behind the scene and look at the parents, are you just trying to sedate, you know what I'm saying, so that they stay out of your hair? Or are you taking and consequentially your actions of not giving them the tools that they will be with you longer as a dependent than the people over here that are taught to do it and find out for themselves?
Well, see, parents today are in a unique situation. So, I mean, that's why, you know, we can't be too hard on them. This is the first time that, you know, they're raising a generation of kids that, you know, are all about social media. You know what I mean? When we were growing up, social media didn't exist. I mean, I don't think cell phones existed. I mean, only like super rich people, like in the movies, had like car phones at the time. You had a pager or something like that. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's hard for parents to they're sort of in a brave new world, and it's difficult to navigate, and you don't understand it, so you don't know what your kid is doing on the phone. You know what I mean? And that's another thing too, where parents have to be educated about this as well, because that you don't know. You don't know what is TikTok, what is Snapchat, and even like parents think they got it all together, and like, oh, my kids aren't, because they hear about Facebook, and the second that you got on Facebook, all your kids jumped off of Facebook and went on some other platform you didn't know about. You know what I mean? Creating, or if you did find out about it, they're creating fake pages or all this other kind of stuff. So it's just, you know, it's difficult. Like, to navigate social media and your kids is difficult. You know what I mean? There are things I guess parents can do. You know what I mean? You can monitor, you know, they're making sure that they're not, you know, but see, also makes it different to do it, right? Because, you know, kids don't watch TV anymore, right? And so it's this kind of thing too, where it's like they're live streaming things, right? And so it's like, you know, sometimes they're live streaming on their phone because they can do everything on their phone. So, you know, it's just I wish I had an answer. I don't have an answer around this, just because it's so new. You
Right.
know, for parents who are raising kids in this new world.
New vortex.
Yeah.
But still, it's not the teacher's problem all the time. It's got to begin somewhere at home. Because if you set the precedence for a desire to learn, a desire to have, but not everybody can. So you can't always fault the parents either.
Oh, no, I agree. Like sometimes, and I don't want to make it seem that way, because sometimes you have parents who, they do everything they could possibly do, and you just have a kid that still strays. You know what I mean? They still just, it is what it is. You know what I mean? They just don't get it, you know? And so, but, you know, we're talking about outliers, right? The outlier of the kid that has everything but still turns out to be a serial killer, right? Or the outlier of the kid that has nothing and grows up to be president of the United States.
Right.
But I mean, but for the most part, you know, when we're talking about most kids, you know what I mean? It is this thing where they need to have somebody, no matter who it is, mom, dad, uncle, cousin, teacher, somebody down the street, somebody in the program that they belong to, you know, that can guide them, you know.
And then throwing money at you doesn't work either. Now, I was going through an email not too long ago, and somebody sent me this email of an old, back in the day, Andy Griffin show. And whoever cast that particular show, they had an advanced vision that needs to be recognized. Because they cast, they had the guy that plays Opie, which is Ron Howard, okay, who's grown up through that to be the man that he is, producer and director. Now, they had one segment that they had the kid that was a bully, an older kid that was bullying him, and it was Donald Trump.
Really?
You got to look it up and see Donald Trump. Just Google Donald Trump in Andy Griffin show. And he was like, Opie was like, Ron Howard was maybe like about 8 or 9. And he was coming on at like about 11 or 12. And he was bullying Ron, and no matter what, his friends were trying to talk him into just, man, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You know what I'm saying? Interfering. And so when he talked to his father about the situation, his father said, sometimes, you know, you just got to stand down and, you know, defend yourself and just be a man about the situation, because that's how Pop's talking. And so the day of the fight, when it was supposed to happen, then Ron came up to just handle his own. Know he's going to get his head bashed in. But at the time, he said, well, you're going to give me the money or whatever, taking his little lunch and whatever. He said, no, I'm not going to do it. You know, I'd rather fight you. And at the time, he said, I'd rather fight you than old boy punked out. And so, how ironically, years later, as a grown man, we still have the bully syndrome. And the bully syndrome is when we're fighting back, like we're seeing relevant in today, this moment, in this election. Now we're hearing a lot different rhetoric. If I lose, the other day I heard something, I don't like losing. I don't like losing, and I might just leave and go somewhere else, and I might do this. Okay, now the tune is changing because people are sitting up and saying, I don't have to take this anymore. And with a bully, he's able to flourish because he puts the fear, and you're not able to overcome the fear. So once you teach your kid how to modify the behavior, especially where it comes to fear, because fear is not knowing what's out there. But if you expose them and saying, okay, there's no ghost under the bed. I'm looking, you have me looking there in the closet every night, and the same thing happens. Nobody's there. So sooner or later, they get the understanding that there's nothing to be feared of in the dark. And then suddenly, they don't mind if you turn the lights out at night. It's learned behavior. So constantly, we may not have the money, but we can just take slowly and surely, one step at a time, giving kids learned behavior.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how you that you brought that up about bullying being learned behavior and different things like that, because you know there's a lot of talk about like toxic masculinity, like what's it like to be a man, and you know, and I think that a lot of that too is this the machismo stuff, and you know I never lose and all this kind of you know and stuff, and it's why I think a lot of men in particular of all races are attracted to Donald Trump, right? Because they feel like, man, that's a man who says what he means and means what he says and stonewalls people, but is that what it means to be a man? You know, that's what we've been taught.
Exactly.
But is it really?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
To lie and to cheat and to bully your way into things, you know? But people look at that and they think, wow, you know?
Exactly.
And so that's when, they're like, why did so many black men vote for Donald Trump? I mean, I don't know if a lot of black men voted for Donald Trump. I think more black men voted for Donald Trump than voted for, Hillary Clinton or whatever. But I think there's attraction to that. And there's a certain black men who live their life the way Donald Trump lives his life. You know what I mean? I have all these women, and I'm talking about from every different social economic background, from the preacher, to, you're somebody,
overcompensation is what it's called.
It's like, I have all these women and I treat them the way that I want to treat them and I say what I want to say and I do what I want to do. Or conversely, you felt like you've never had a voice, right? You feel like you're a man, but you've never been able to just be a man, and you see somebody who makes you feel like you can do it, And it's the same thing about, it's just a lot of that just goes into, again, teaching people just let all that stuff go. You know what I mean?
It's not that serious.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's not. To be a man with all these notches in the belt or have 50,000 kids out there and I ain't supporting a single one of them and stuff like that. I mean, guys, this machismo stuff, this whole bullying, I mean, it is not cranked up the way it's supposed to be. Because sooner or later, no matter how, now here's one for machismo, no matter how bad you are, I know on the block for you guys that are from the street, no matter how bad you are, there's always that bad Leroy Brown. That was bad, or that guy that was named Sue that had to fight his way through. There's always going to be somebody badder than you. So you've got to learn from your experiences and learn sometimes you've got to negotiate. You got to navigate. Now, in these last few minutes we have left, I want to talk about some of the projects that you have coming up and some things you're involved with and how people can reach out to you and, because you've got a lot of plethora of experiences and whatever.
Great. So. Yeah, so I have a website, actually, www.angelanicoleparker.com, where you can learn more about my books. I write books. I have actually a book coming out in March called I Am Phenomenal, which is a quotes and notes from inspirational women for young girls who want to change the world. And then, of course, I have, again, Generation Next, which is my online news magazine for Black youth. I'm always looking for reporters, and you can find that. And Generation Next is GenerationNext online.com. So it's only one N. So with that, and at Phenom Girls, www.phenomgirls.org. That's my mentorship program for young middle school girls. I'm always looking for mentors and for girls that want to participate. And, I just want to spend my time sort of growing those programs and, just reaching as many people, as possible.
Now, all of my interviews, I've always asked, because I remember one of the greatest ones I did was Jay-Z.
Oh.
When he was selling out of the back of his car and admittedly a dope salesman or whatever they call him, okay, so that he could produce records. And I had a chance to ask him questions, and then over the last maybe 3 years, he had the interview with 60 Minutes. And it was the first rapper that 60 Minutes was able to talk to him. And the questions they asked him as a grown man were the same questions I asked him that day. Asked him where he came from, what does he want to do, and where does he see himself in 5 years. And he told me everything he wanted to do, and he achieved everything, except he didn't tell me he was going to marry Beyonce, because I probably would have quit the interview right there and laughed him off the stage. But he's accomplished that. So in that one, if you set your goals high, you can get there. So I'm going to ask you right now, where do you see yourself in 2 years?
Well, for me, I think I see myself again expanding kind of Generation Next, which has been my dream since I was 19, and Phenom Girls, which I've wanted to do for like the past couple of years. I see myself, writing more books because that's kind of what my passion is. And I see myself really positioning myself as someone who can be on the forefront of talking about violence and trauma among Black women. For 15 years, I worked with Genesee Center. Our primary client base are Black women. And Black women have a different set of circumstances, a different set of trauma, a different set of needs, and I would like to be a voice for that particular population.
And we love to hear the great voices, and we need some fresh voices out there for our young ladies. And so the young ladies are put in line. They can keep the young men in line, and that's just the bottom line. So we'd like to thank you, Dr. Parker, for coming on and sharing your experiences and your joys. And folks out there, thanks for coming on. And this is Center Stage, and we're going to be bringing you more interviews like that in depth, where we just chop it up on how to establish those things that we need to make a united, once again, loving, caring community. And in doing so, we can find our way to a loving, caring, more deserving world that's not cluttered with chaos, but is filled with love. Until next time, this is D Nice for Dr. Parker saying, be good to yourself, put God first, and everything else will follow. I guarantee it.
This day will surely come along. Has some angels watching me to make